So it's been 5 long years since I've done a video on the round type Garcia fishing reels. I promised more videos, it never happened, but that's all changing. Today I'm launching a new series again on everything Abu when it comes to the round type bait casting reels. In front of me I have a 5500 C3, a 6500 CS Rocket, and the old style 5500C. There's some slight variations in all these reels. We'll talk about them as we push through the series, but today I'm going to talk about the 5500 C3. It'll be a 2-part series, and we're going to get started right now. 5500 C3. We're going to do a 2-part series. Today we're going to work on the left side plate, the frame, the worm drive, and the bearings inside the spool. Part 2 is going to be right side plate, dealing with the drag washers and the anti-reverse bearing. I've already pulled the screws off the left side, makes it a little quicker to disassemble. One screw left on the right side. That's going to come out. I'm going to set this to the side. This will be part 2. Pull the axle out, set that to the side. Pull the spool out. So we're going to be working on the cog wheel, the bearings inside the spool. There's 2 bearings. There's one on this side and one underneath this little gear. It's right there. We're also going to deal with the worm drive mechanism. Show you how to take that apart and clean it. If you watched my last video, we talked about removing the plastic retainer on a factory installed cog wheel and replacing it with a C-clip. This reel has already been done, but I'm going to remove the clip and we're going to start from scratch. To remove it, if you take a razor blade and shove it up against the steel shaft, you can feel it cut through the plastic ring. And if you rotate the cog wheel around several times, you'll eventually cut through it and you'll be able to remove the cog wheel. One thing that I don't think I touched on was once you get it off, you need to take the razor blade and make sure that you have shaved all the plastic off the cog wheel. Also, you need to take a ice pick or something round, put it down into the hole, and make sure all the plastic is removed from the inner edge of the slot. If you don't, it's going to be restricted when you put it back on. Basically what I'm going to do with this service is I'm going to clean the left side plate. I'm going to put a thin layer of grease. You can just put it on with your finger. Take a little grease. I like to coat the inside of this plate so that if I'm saltwater fishing, I don't have to worry a whole lot about problems down the road with corrosion. Before you put it back on, I'm going to put 1 drop of oil on the shaft. I'm going to replace the cog wheel. Then I'm going to replace the C-clip. Easier said than done. I never use any grease on the gears or the post. I'll use my oil to lubricate both gears and I'm done. Gonna work on the bearings. Pull the gear out. 1 bearing on this side should tap out. The brake system on this particular reel will just literally snap off. Literally. We'll tap that bearing out. On this side you have a brass washer. It's a spacer that goes down in before the bearing. Don't forget it. Basically what I do here is I clean everything up real good. I use my lighter fluid. Can use my little agitator. Put everything in there, shake it up a little bit. Use some canned air, blow it all off, wipe it off, get it nice and clean. I'm only going to put 1 drop of oil on each bearing as I put it back together. Anything more, you're just dragging it down. So we're going to put the spacer back in. Put the bearing back in. Snap the clip back on. Insert the other bearing. I'll clean my gear up a little bit. Snap it back into place. Couple drops of oil on the gears. And we're done. We'll set that to the side. Talk about the worm drive. We're going to disassemble that. Remove this clip. Remember, the 2 feet go on the ground. Bottom of the reel, downward. When you're putting it back on, make sure the 2 feet are downward. Remove the cap on the pawl. The pawl should come out. When that happens, this thing's just going to fall apart. Clean everything up. Again, before I put things back together, I like to take a little dab of grease, and I do this with my finger a lot. Sometimes I use my brush. Little dab on the brush. And I'll put it on just a little bit heavy, but then I'll go back and I'll wipe it off. This is really for saltwater protection. If you're fishing in fresh water all the time, I don't see a big need to do this. And I'll even take some of the excess off with a paper towel. You never get it all off unless you clean it with some type of a solution. Last thing I want is it to get on my line, so I'm going to clean that out real good. I would take all these parts, put them in my agitator, put some lighter fluid in there, shake them around real gently, let them soak for a few minutes, pull them back out. Use some compressed air, clean them up. So everything's clean. Let's go ahead and put it back together. I'm going to put a little grease on the clip. Everything else gets oil. I'm going to put a drop of oil on my pawl. You have to work the pawl back in. Make sure the pawl goes all the way down and seats into the grooves on the worm drive. Another drop of oil on top of that. Some on the threads. Once everything's back together, I'm going to lubricate the worm drive with nothing but oil. I'm going to put some oil on the tube and some on the gear. No grease. Super loose, super clean, ready to go. So that's it for part one. We've gone through the frame, serviced the worm drive. We've serviced the cogwheel on the left side plate, and we've serviced the bearings on both sides of the spool. Check out part two for the right side plate, drag washers, and anti-reverse bearing.